My wife was having an affair with a 22-year-old while I worked myself to the bone to support our family. When I finally saw the proof, the damning messages and the heartbreaking confessions from my daughters, I knew I had to plan a revenge that would utterly ruin everything she had built. My name is Carlos. I'm 52, and I'm an entrepreneur in the educational technology space. I truly started from nothing. I was literally selling brochures back in college. Now, I run a company that employs nearly 5,000 people. My wife, Julieta, is 46 and works as a human resources manager for a big multinational corporation. We met in school, and for years, I honestly believed we were one of those rare couples that actually gets to grow old together. We were blessed with 3 beautiful daughters: Laura, 24, Isabella, 21, and Manu, 18. For a very long time, I was the man who provided everything for them. I never once imagined that the greatest humiliation of my life would happen right inside my own home. The notification popped up late one night while I was still at the office finalizing some reports. It was from an unknown number with no profile picture. The person claimed to be the girlfriend of a boy named Rafael and warned me that he was sleeping with Julieta from the HR department. My first reaction was that it had to be a mistake or some pathetic joke, but she sounded far too certain. She provided specific dates, sent Instagram photos of company events that perfectly matched my travel schedule, and even named a coworker of Julieta's that I only vaguely knew from a dinner years ago. All the details terrifyingly aligned. The most crushing part was reading the name of the hotel in the city center where the whole sordid thing started, a place I had personally booked for a national convention for my company. I had spent months organizing that event, carefully delegating responsibilities so I could attend this crucial business trip. It was my meticulously planned absence, the result of my hard work, that had created the perfect opportunity for her to betray me. In a cruel twist of fate, all my effort was rewarded with a knife in the back. The next few days were a blur. I was numb, almost sleepwalking through life. Maintaining a facade of normalcy felt utterly surreal. I'd look at Julieta and wonder, how can she still smile? How can she wish me a good morning or ask me to grab bread on Sunday morning? The cold calculation was what gutted me most. This wasn't a sudden impulse, a drunken mistake one night. This was an ongoing plan, a calculated performance built on the solid foundation of a husband's trust, a man who was always present and taking care of every single thing. I kept the discovery to myself. For days, I replayed every trip, every colleague dinner, every late-night meeting in my mind, and each memory brought a fresh wave of humiliation. I saw us in family photos, celebrating milestones, while she was already living a separate, secret life. The pain was unbearable. I felt like the ultimate fool, the last person on earth to know, the kind of man whose success and provision were somehow just not enough. The spiral had begun, because the deeper I dug, the more things I realized I'd carelessly ignored. And yet, the worst was still to come. The betrayal itself had ripped me apart, but I didn't yet know that the most devastating blow would come not from her, but from the 3 people I loved more than anything in the world. I'll never forget the details. His name was Rafael, a 22-year-old marketing intern at Julieta's company. When I saw the boy's picture on Instagram, sent to me by the original messenger, I felt a horrifying mix of disbelief and sheer disgust. He looked even younger than his age. He had that trendy, youthful vibe, a backwards cap, a band t-shirt he probably didn't even listen to. And there he was, his hand resting on my wife's waist at a party I hadn't known about. The caption was a gut punch, the best night of my life. And by the way, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now to the rest of the story. I started piecing the timeline together. That best night party happened the exact same weekend I was in Sao Paulo, presenting a new product line to foreign investors. I remember sending her a text that night, telling her I missed her. She'd replied with a heart emoji, claiming she was exhausted and going to bed early. Now I know she was with him. The chilling contradiction between her fake affection and the raw reality of those images made me physically ill. Every little detail was a fresh stab. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the entire production, the careful way she manufactured her alibi. While I was under the spotlight, showcasing my company to executives, she was undressing for a boy who had barely graduated high school. This wasn't an oversight. This was cold, calculated foresight, a plan executed perfectly to fill the gaps in my demanding schedule. It made me feel like I'd been sleeping next to a masterful actress for years without ever reading her script. The boy's age terrified me. He was almost the same age as Manu, just 4 years older than my youngest daughter. It triggered something raw inside me. Beyond the moral failure, it showed me how huge the distance between Julieta and I had become. When did she start seeing me as old, boring, and predictable? When did she start looking at boys like him with genuine desire? I felt sick. My marital bed felt polluted. Even worse, I realized I'd been living with a woman who had the capacity and the nerve to do such a thing. I kept thinking back to all the times she'd told me, "It's fine," or "Thank you for taking care of us." And like an utter fool, I had accepted it. I thought the lack of passion was just the normal wear and tear of a long marriage. After all, 24 years don't pass without a few scars. But no, she was simply too bored to resist the excitement of someone who probably couldn't even properly fold his own laundry. I offered stability, he offered thrills. She chose the thrills, even if it meant risking her entire life. From that moment on, the pit inside me widened. If she could plan all of that so well, what else was she hiding? I started looking at my own house with intense suspicion. And that's when a much darker truth began to surface. It was still vague, still lurking in the shadows, but it screamed in the quiet corners of my mind. Did my daughters know? I kept living with Julieta for another 2 months after the discovery. It wasn't a choice, it was pure inertia. Part of me was still trying to intellectually process what had happened. My brain simply refused to accept the full reality. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., hit the gym, bury myself in work, and only return at night, utterly exhausted. It was a strategy to dull the pain, a rigid routine that served as a wall against the emotional carnage consuming me. Every room in the house felt like it was mocking me. The sofa where we watched movies as a family was now where I imagined her kissing that boy. The kitchen, where she'd make my coffee, smelled sour, corrupted by the betrayal. Our bedroom became a minefield. I'd lie on one side, staring at the ceiling, while she lay on the other, pretending to be asleep. There were no genuine moments, no heartfelt conversations, just silence, the creaking of the mattress emphasizing the gulf between two strangers. The pretense was the hardest part. Julieta never stopped smiling in front of the girls, asking about their day, even asking if I wanted my usual dinner. I'd only answer with a grunt or pretend to be busy on the phone. It wasn't that I lacked the desire to scream, to smash things, to throw her out. I was just paralyzed, as if my soul had exited my body. The man I had been for 24 years, the father, husband, and provider, was dead. All that was left was a functional shell programmed for work and survival. At the company, I managed to keep the performance going. There, at least, I still commanded respect. I still had control over something. But during my commute, in silent showers, and in the quiet seconds before sleep, I would silently break down. Crying became a private ritual. The worst part was that nobody knew. To the outside world, I was still the same old Carlos, the successful tycoon with the perfect family. The irony was a constant, bitter companion. During this period, I felt like an extra in my own life. I watched my family scenes like someone viewing an old movie with a script I already knew and hated. I was physically present but emotionally absent. I sat at dinner, seeing everything through a thick pane of glass, all while keeping my secret. Then, I started noticing small things, shifty glances, sudden silences, little gestures I would have missed before. It hit me. Maybe Julieta wasn't the only one hiding secrets. The possibility began to consume me. What if they knew? What if my own daughters, the girls I had sacrificed everything for, were complicit in this theater? I couldn't believe it, yet the pieces were starting to snap into place. I just wasn't ready for what came next. I can't pinpoint the exact moment I realized something was wrong with the girls. Maybe it was the way they'd avoid my gaze at the dinner table, or how they'd instantly fall silent when Julieta walked into the room. The entire house was saturated with a different kind of quiet. It wasn't awkwardness, it was guilt. I began to study all three of them more closely. Each carried a noticeable weight on her shoulders. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I called Manu in for a talk. She was the youngest, but always the most attuned to me. We shut the door to my home office. All I had to do was ask her, calmly, if she knew anything. She immediately dissolved. She collapsed onto my lap, sobbing, apologizing over and over. She said she didn't want to hurt me, that it had taken her completely by surprise. And then, she told me everything. Nearly 3 years ago, she'd come home early from school and found her mother kissing Raphael on the living room sofa. She froze, stunned in the hallway. Julieta saw her, rushed over, and begged her not to tell me. She swore it was a one-time mistake and that Dad doesn't need to know. Those words sliced into me like a knife. Why keep it a secret for so long? Why didn't any of them tell me? Manu explained she started having anxiety attacks after that day. She looked at her mother differently but didn't have the strength to confront her, and slowly convinced herself it had been an isolated incident. But it wasn't. The affair continued, and the worst part was that eventually, the other two also found out, and kept the same devastating silence. The next day, I confronted Isabella and Laura. Their reactions were almost identical: tears, guilt, and desperation. Isabella said she'd overheard suspicious calls and seen messages on her mother's phone, but she thought she was protecting the family. Laura, the eldest, was more direct. "I thought you already knew, Dad, and were just pretending not to see it." That shattered me. The idea that my own daughter thought I was so blind or weak that I would simply choose to ignore something so profound. For years, they had shared this secret, treating it like a parallel truth operating inside our home. The pain of her betrayal was one thing, but theirs was different. I raised them with so much love, so much sacrifice. I was always there. I paid for private school, college, exchange programs, the best healthcare, everything. I worked tirelessly to give them the best possible life. And in the end, they chose to protect their cheating mother instead of telling me. They chose complicity. After that, I could never look at the house the same way. I saw everything as a flimsy movie set, a soap opera facade that was finally crumbling. I felt like the family idiot, the man who clung to a lie while everyone deceived him, the useful but emotionally disposable provider. They regretted it. They cried in my arms, but the damage was permanent. I'm the kind of father who would move mountains. I didn't do it because anyone asked, but because I wanted to. I grew up watching my own father toil in a mechanic shop, coming home every day reeking of oil with hands calloused from hard work. I swore I'd do things differently for my kids. And I did. I built a company from scratch. No partners, no investors, no favors. I woke up before dawn for years, sacrificing vacations, trips, and even birthdays, all for their future. I remember Laura's smile when she got into college, Isabella's tears boarding her exchange flight, and Manu's bright eyes with her first cell phone. Every single milestone was bought with my sweat, and I did it all gladly. I never rubbed it in their faces or demanded gratitude. But now, sitting in this very office where I signed contracts and planned the growth of a company employing thousands, all I feel is a gaping hole. All that effort, all that dedication, meant nothing when I needed them to stand up for me. It's hard to explain what it feels like to be betrayed by your own children. It's not just sadness, it's an empty void, the sense of having been exploited. I was the guarantor of the house, the food, the education, the cars, the insurance, the travel, and yet, I was treated as disposable, silenced, and deceived. My girls, the same ones I carried on my shoulders in the park, who slept on my chest during thunderstorms, chose to live a massive lie. And they did it with a terrible naturalness. There was no anonymous note, no secret attempt to warn me, nothing. I started to question everything. What if I'd been one of those absent, cold, distant fathers? Would that have changed anything? Or was I simply too kind? The anger that festered inside me was cold and quiet. It was no longer a rebellious impulse. It was a dense, cruel realization. I was the family's foundation, but as a man, a person, a husband, and a father, I was completely invisible. That was the cruelest lesson of all. You can accept a marriage ending, but when you realize your entire role as a father was built around a massive lie, everything changes. I even lost my passion for the company. What once filled me with pride now felt hollow. I couldn't walk the halls with the same spark. I felt that all my success was a deception, that everything I'd built had no real foundation. It was a castle of smoke. In that profound existential hole, an idea began to take root. A persistent fantasy of disappearing, of leaving everything behind. Maybe I could still find some peace somewhere no one knew my name. Maybe in a forgotten town, I could stop being the fool who financed a family play for 2 decades. The idea started as a silly thought that would invade me just before sleep. What if I just vanished? Settle my accounts, sell my assets, and head to a quiet place on the Mexican coast? I pictured it vividly. Me walking barefoot on the sand, unshaven, no phone, no emails, no past, just the sound of the ocean and the smell of grilled fish. For the first time in months, the thought made me smile, even if it was a tired one. Every morning, the fantasy solidified. I began researching small towns in Mexico, Cimblas, Bacala, Isla Holbox, places that meant absolutely nothing to me, and for that reason, they seemed perfect. The idea of disappearing became a comfort, almost a desperate prayer. It wasn't about running away. It was about escaping the identity that was destroying me. I wouldn't be Carlos, the CEO, Carlos, the family man, or Carlos, Julietta's husband. I would just be a broken man who needed to leave to maintain his sanity. I spoke to my lawyer, telling him I wanted to travel indefinitely. He looked at me with a mix of pity and concern. Legally, that's a huge risk. You have too many assets, stocks, and liabilities. You can't just disappear. He warned me about asset freezes, the chaos it would cause the company, the tax implications, and the divorce complications. But I barely heard him. None of that mattered anymore. The money, the properties, the possessions. It felt like holding a bag of gold inside a burning house. I just wanted peace. The objects surrounding me became suffocating reminders. The luxury car, the huge house, the custom suit. All of it was a costume I was forced to wear. And the more I entertained the idea of leaving, the more distant I became from everyone, even my daughters. They tried to get closer, but the bond was fractured beyond immediate repair. I started keeping a passport in my office drawer, just in case, I told myself, but I knew I was preparing for a permanent exit. I canceled meetings and appointments, becoming a ghost in my own company. I didn't leave for one reason only, Manu. She was still shaken and began sleeping in the room next to mine. She was scared and fragile. Although my soul was already thousands of miles away, I couldn't abandon her. The call to escape was a constant, insistent whisper. I just needed to arrange a few things, ensure Manu was safe, and then I'd be gone. Far from everything. Far from everyone. For the first time in a long time, a quiet fire burned inside me. It whispered, Carlos, you can start over. But first, you have to burn everything down. Even after everything, a part of me still needed to understand why my girls had chosen to keep silent for so long. I started with Manu again. I called her to the kitchen on a Saturday morning, made coffee, and tried to keep my voice steady. But the moment I asked her if she had lied to protect me or to protect her mother, she erupted in tears. It was the heavy, heartbroken cry of someone who'd carried a secret too long. Through her sobs, she kept repeating that she didn't want to see me suffer, that she was terrified. She said Julieta promised it was a one-time thing, that she believed her, and when she realized the affair was still going, she felt too ashamed. She said she couldn't find the words, and eventually thought I must have known but was pretending for the sake of my pride. She hugged me and apologized a countless number of times. It was confusing because despite the crushing disappointment, I still loved her. Loving someone and being profoundly let down were agonizingly coexisting emotions. Next was Isabella. She was initially more guarded, perhaps out of embarrassment. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she wasn't completely sure, that she only suspected. But when I brought up the messages she had shared with Manu, she finally broke. She admitted she felt torn, thinking she was protecting the family and avoiding a greater catastrophe. I thought if we knew, everything would end, she confessed, and in that, she wasn't wrong. But that didn't lessen the sting of her omission. Laura, the oldest, was last. From her, I expected a more mature, conscious response, and in a way, I got it. She didn't try to make excuses. She simply said she knew, she saw what was happening, and she chose not to get involved. It was cowardice, Dad, I know, but I just didn't know how to face it. That single phrase crystallized everything. They didn't know how to face the truth, so instead of coming to me, they hid in silence. They let me drown in a reality that everyone but me knew was a massive lie. I looked at each of them, feeling a bone-deep weariness I couldn't hide. I told them I still loved them and that wouldn't change, but I was clear, our relationship would never be the same. Regaining my trust would require something I wasn't capable of giving, at least not right then. They promised they wanted to fix things, to do whatever it took. But their words, at this point in our history, felt hollow. I heard them, but I couldn't feel them. It was as if every emotion was passing through a thick filter that blocked any attempt at genuine reconnection. This confrontation wounded me deeply. Seeing my broken, tearful daughters, repentant and begging for forgiveness, while simultaneously feeling betrayed, used, and deceived by them was a painful paradox. I loved them fiercely, but they had also hurt me. How do you rebuild when the foundation has been shattered? How do you trust people who deliberately blinded you for years? I had no answers then, but one thing was certain, normalcy was dead. Julieta never saw it coming. After discovering the betrayal, the young lover, and my daughter's silence, filing for divorce was my last act of dignity. My lawyer handled everything with total discretion. The day she was served the papers, she froze. We were sitting in the living room. She opened the envelope, scanned it quickly, and started to laugh. A strained, nervous laugh that soon turned into hysterical tears. It was the first time in months she looked truly surprised, as if she believed until that moment that I would never actually have the courage to leave. At first, she stuck to the script. She cried, apologized, swore she loved me, claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She tried to manipulate me with shared memories, the kids, the hard times we'd overcome. But I was saturated with excuses. I just stayed silent. When she realized my forgiveness wasn't coming, her tone shifted, and her true face emerged, the one that only appears when control is lost. She started to scream. She accused me of being a coward, said I was destroying the family out of pure pride, and then moved to threats. She threatened to go to the media, to tell everyone I was abusive, that she had videos, that she would ruin my reputation. She even threatened to go to my company and spread rumors that I used corporate funds for escorts, promising to cancel me in weeks. It was a vicious, poisonous storm of words, a desperate attempt to bind me through fear. But I wasn't the old Carlos anymore. I stood up, walked to the shelf, grabbed my phone, and showed her that I had been recording since the moment the papers were served. She instantly turned pale. She stammered, trying to backtrack, claiming she didn't mean it, that it was just desperation, but it was too late. I handed the recording to my lawyer the next day. He immediately filed for a restraining order and launched a lawsuit for attempted blackmail and defamation. For the first time, Julieta was going to face real consequences. What shocked me was how quickly the mask dropped. Julieta, the woman who had played the role of the rational, strong, thoughtful executive for 2 decades, revealed herself as petty, cruel, and desperate for control. She wasn't crying from remorse. She was crying because she was losing her comfort, her security, the power that came with having a husband who supported her completely while she did whatever she pleased with whomever she wanted. Now, she was forced to deal with the public exposure, the shame, and the weight of her choices. After that explosion, we maintained zero direct contact. Everything went through our lawyers. The divorce was underway, and I was determined to ensure she couldn't destroy anything else, not my business, and certainly not my peace of mind. But I knew she wouldn't accept defeat quietly, and I still had to protect the person who was most vulnerable. After Julietta's outburst, our house became an emotional war zone. Manu, the youngest, started actively avoiding her mother. You could see it on her. She was hunched, quiet, and deeply anxious. She began sleeping with her door locked, headphones constantly on, and her appetite disappeared. One night, she called me into her room, tears welling up as she told me she couldn't live there anymore. She couldn't handle the atmosphere, the yelling, and her mother's judgmental looks. She asked me, "Dad, can you take me with you?" It was the fastest decision I've ever made. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, close to her high school. It wasn't luxurious, but it was quiet. The first few days, she cried a lot. She was terrified Julieta would do something crazy, afraid her sisters would judge her, and felt deep guilt for choosing my side. But slowly, with consistent silence, warm meals, and security, she started to find her breath again. She was sleeping better, and a timid laugh returned. It was like watching a wilted flower slowly trying to bloom in the middle of winter. I hired a psychologist specializing in family trauma. Manu agreed to go. Initially, it was a struggle. She felt responsible for everything, for witnessing the betrayal, for not telling me, for staying by my side. But the therapist gave me a powerful insight. She's trying to be a child of 2 worlds that have simultaneously collapsed. That's enough to shatter any teenager. It was then I understood the true depth of the wound Julieta had inflicted, not just on me, but on her as well. We became a silent team. We'd have breakfast together, sometimes in comfortable silence, share lunch on Saturdays, and watch TV series. Little by little, I was getting back the daughter I thought I'd lost. She'd thank me for the smallest things, leaving a light on, bringing home a late afternoon snack, remembering her favorite ice cream. And I would thank her, too, because she stayed. She gave me a reason not to vanish forever, a powerful reminder that despite all the chaos, there was still something worth saving. Julieta, naturally, went ballistic. She texted me, accusing me of kidnapping my daughter and threatening to sue for parental alienation, but my lawyer managed it. There was no legal standing. Manu was 18, lucid, and clearly stated she wanted to live with me of her own free will. Julieta had lost control yet again, making her even more volatile. But I kept my distance. My only focus now was Manu, ensuring she could prepare for college in peace. She was the reason I postponed my escape. How could I leave her? She was fragile and rebuilding. I couldn't abandon her in the middle of this disaster. I promised myself I would only leave when she was safe, grounded, and ready to stand on her own. Until that day, I would be her safe harbor. And maybe, in the process, I could rebuild a little of myself, too. Julieta desperately tried to flip the narrative. Realizing she was losing her grip, she started calling relatives, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, even a distant cousin, telling them I'd gone crazy, become abusive, and was trying to steal my daughter. But the plan backfired because, gradually, the truth started leaking out. The Raphael story, the recorded threats, the defamation lawsuit. Then, she faced the ultimate blow. Her own company temporarily fired her pending an investigation into unethical behavior. It was a difficult few months. Julieta became an isolated, bitter figure. She tried to spin her story, but nobody believed her anymore. Her friends drifted away, her reputation at the company was destroyed, and my lawyer's lawsuit moved quickly. Formal charges of emotional blackmail and attempted defamation were accepted. The direct fallout included the freezing of some assets, the internal investigation, and the complete loss of her professional standing. The woman who once boasted of being strong and respected was now the subject of whispers in the hallways. Meanwhile, Manu was thriving. She slowly returned to her routine, laughed more easily, and started studying with genuine focus. She began making college plans, mentioning psychology, perhaps to help people like herself. And I, for the first time in a very long time, felt a pure, unbittered sense of pride. We started going out for Sunday lunch again. We took a short trip to Parody. It was simple, but it was real. It was a new beginning, quiet but meaningful. My other 2 daughters also made efforts to reconnect. It was slow going. Wounds were still fresh, but little by little, through honest conversations, tears, and understanding silence, we managed to build bridges. It's not what it once was, and it may never be, but there's a foundation of respect, regret, and a mutual desire to salvage something. I made it clear, the love is still there, but trust has to be earned back gradually. My dream of disappearing is still alive, but now it has a deadline. I made myself a promise. When Manu finishes high school and heads off to college, I'm taking a sabbatical year. I'll step away from active company participation, delegate all my responsibilities, and leave. I want to cross Mexico end to end, by car, boat, or bus, whatever works. I want to get lost. I want to find myself again without a phone or a watch, just a backpack and the certainty that I left everything in order. Today, when I look back, I see a life that was thoroughly dismantled. But I also see a man who, piece by piece, started to rebuild. Julieta lost everything because she took the dirtiest path. I lost a huge amount of peace, time, and illusion, but I gained something I didn't even realize I was missing: freedom. Maybe in the end, this was both the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me.